Hello, and welcome back to Fusion Writing, where building character meets creating structure. We're on our map day, and that means we get to go into a little more detail on the topic for the week. So, without any further preamble, I'm going to turn it over to Victoria to talk to us today.
Hello, Lilligans, anti-novelists, and friends. So I gave you a sneak peek yesterday about where we're headed. We are headed to wrangle and bring to heel those characters that can sometimes go horribly wrong. I've experienced this myself in the novel that I'm currently writing, which I have set aside to finish a how-to write book. But what I found was often characters would go sideways when I hadn't formally developed them far enough. That meant there were details and things left undecided. So then in the writing, it gave me a lot more leeway for them to do whatever they wanted to do. I'll give you an example quickly. I had a side character who I hadn't developed very far, but I knew that this person was going to be important to the story. And I thought, oh, I'll just do the writing and see where this leads me. I tried to pants it, which I know better. Anyone that knows me knows I am an extreme plotter. However, I thought I'm just going to give this a go and see what happens. Well, what happened is that character turned into an entirely different character in the writing of it. That was not a good thing because that displaced several other things in the story. So when something like that happens, either because you haven't done sufficient planning, which is fine, I'm not saying you have to, but I'm saying have some tools in your toolkit just in case things go sideways, or when you're writing a character and maybe there's a turn of events or there is even a scene or a part of a chapter that sends that into a little bit of a different direction and you find yourself wondering, where did I come up with that? How did that happen? These are some of the things that we want to address. So let's look at the first one. In the situation where you're writing along, writing a character that maybe you haven't fully developed, that's going to be your first tool or trick, is when you feel in the writing, and you'll feel it when it happens, that this character is either saying things that don't resonate, they're taking actions in a way that you're wondering, is this authentic to this character? Because this doesn't really sound like him or her or whatever. When you get those thoughts, that's when it's time to take a break from the writing, pull out those character cards, and jot those details down. Now, in my book, Zettelkasten for Fiction, I have a section on character development, and there's a card for each set of character things that you want to figure out. Go through your tools and decide, is this character positive or negative? What are their attitudes? Dig a little deeper into who they are and start to reveal for yourself what's the reality, what's the truth underneath this character. Because if you don't know that, you're probably going to write them sideways in a way that doesn't ring authentic when you go back and read it. Another example of that is, what if you use other characters as a mirror in which to discover a character that you're either not sure about or who has gone sideways? So let's say you're writing a scene and your character does something that feels out of touch. It doesn't feel like it resonates with them. Again, this happened to me. I wrote a scene where my female character comes in and discovers that her apartment's been broken into. I had to make a decision. What kind of woman is she for the reader at that point in the story? Is she going to charge in and look around and take control and see what's going on? Or is she going to turn inward and collapse and sit crying outside the apartment because she is so paralyzed with fear and the shock of what's happened? I went with B, because at this point in the story, for her to charge in and take control and make an assessment and be proactive, that's not where she is yet, so it wouldn't have rang true. So my first draft of that chapter had to go out the window because her charging in and taking control didn't make sense for who she was then. The way that I discovered that, independent of my writing group, which is over in LiLLiPub, if you haven't joined the Fusion Writing Group, hightail it over there and join us, because we will workshop with you, we will help you figure these things out, and you can learn from our mistakes as well. But independent of my workshop group, I started asking myself questions about that character from the other character's points of view. I started wondering, what would the other lead character say about her in this situation? Well, he would say there's no way she's going to charge in there. She's probably going to coil up in a little ball outside the door, because that's who she was. So by looking at that character through the eyes of your other characters, often you can see those truths about them and then write your way through it. So Develop out those character traits and those character cards as best you can before you write. And then as you're writing, if you're curious or you're starting to wonder if a character is going off the rails, look at them through another character's eyes. Maybe write them a letter from another character, or write your thoughts of that other character in relation to this one that you're curious about. Oftentimes in that process, you can reveal to yourself what their real motivations are, what their true nature is, and you can get yourself back on track. Because at the end of the day, the whole purpose is to get the writing done. So if you've written yourself into a corner, or a character has run off and gone rogue, you've got to get those words back onto the page so that you can get a handle on them and continue writing your way through it. The final one that I will leave you with is do an assessment of the scene and how the character is responding to that scene. We know that scenes are made up of two things: a scene and a sequel. The scene is the action, the thing that takes place, and the sequel is generally a reaction or some kind of recovery, response, consideration. It can be anything that is in relation to what's happened. So when you write the scene and the character feels like it's gone off the rails or a little wonky, list out for yourself, what are the possible sequels? So in my example, she could charge in and take control. Okay, that doesn't really feel right. She could immediately call someone and call for backup, call for help. That didn't seem right either. Collapsing and taking a moment to process what's gone on and decide, okay, I'm terrified, but I still need to find a way to go forward and to walk the reader through that process, that's what felt right. So by listing out those potential sequels to whatever the action was, I was able to discover for myself what the authentic course of action was for her in this situation. And then I was able to write the scene, and it came out authentic and true to life and true to character. So that was how I reined her back in when she was at risk of going way out of her character boundaries. But as the writer, these are the problems we have to solve. And getting to know those people that are running around in your head as if they are actual people is the best way to do that. So hopefully these tips give you a firmer footing for how to wrangle that character and read them so that you can get back on track. I will leave you with the final one, which is to do an assessment of them. In addition to how they're reacting, write out their facial features. What is their body language? What are they thinking before the action happens? And then what are they thinking after it happens? Really read into that character and draw those details out so that number one, you know them better. And number two, you can better write where they need to go instead of where they've gone rogue and you have to wrangle them back. So with that final tip of reading that character and making an assessment of them, I'm going to throw it over to Kathleen because she's going to dig deeper into what this looks like and how you start to capture those traits and ultimately capture that character. So Kathleen, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Victoria. And thank you for the introduction, because I think it's very true that when you want to discover who your character is, one of the best ways to do that is to look at how your character interacts with others, because that's where the character reveals himself to your audience. I mean, you can walk inside your character's head and tell your reader what the character is thinking, but we all know that show is better than tell. And so when you put your character into an interaction, that's when you get to see how the character reacts. And we're going to take a look at character reaction at 4 different levels. And there are actually 4 separate character traits in the sociability group. And what this means is that even though these character traits are very closely related, because they are separate character traits, they can be assigned individually. And it's a whole lot of fun as we go through this exercise, taking character traits that would normally go together, these are going to all be the same, and splitting them up and finding out what kind of a character you get who behaves this way. And so before we can play with that exercise, let's go back into them. We discussed them very briefly in the compass, but we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into them so that we can start playing with them. Okay, the first one is affability. Affability has everything to do with how does your character present himself to the outside world when they're just being themselves. They're not in a conversation, they're just there. Maybe it's the clerk at the DMV and they're waiting for the next person to walk up to the window. What what does their face say? If you're standing in line and you're saying, I'm counting and hoping this one will get done so you can get to that clerk because you don't want to go to that clerk. What's different about them? What do their faces tell you? What you're looking at is their affability. Does one of them look like, oh, you forgot this note? You're going to have to take your form back. And by the way, when you're done, get at the end of the line. Or is it the one who's going to say, oh, no problem, I can fix that for you right here? So your face that they give to the outside world is affability, and you can have a lot of fun just showing what your character looks like. And remember back in the compass, we talked about there's 3 actual levels of affability. One could be, I'm friendly, I'm approachable, please feel free to come to me, I'm open to you. Another one at the other extreme would be, I have no time for you, you have no place in my life, keep your distance. Or the middle of the road one, sadly, might be, I am so into whatever's going on in my headphones that I do not even know you are there. So step into my world at your own risk. So that middle one, I mean, that last one, being all checked out, is fairly new in our society. This simply did not exist much before our current age, except for someone who was locked into their own daydreams. So be aware of that one. So the next one down has to do with courtesy. Now, courtesy is a behavioral trait. How does the character act with respect to other people? Is he ready to say good morning? Is he going to hold the door for you when you're right behind him? If you're running towards the elevator, is he going to keep the door open so you can get on board the elevator? This is the courtesy element. There's an action involved, but it doesn't cost a whole lot to do the right thing there because the action is it's just part of social interaction. And you can have that social interaction anyway. It might as well be a courteous interaction. The next stage is more personal. This is kindness. When you get to kindness, you noticed someone in particular, and that someone in particular has a need, and you reach out from yourself to help deal with that need. So there's a cost to kindness. Maybe you were on your way into the coffee shop and you discover that someone has dropped her notebook and papers have fallen all over the sidewalk. If your instinct is to rush over and help her gather up those papers, you are evidencing kindness. And kindness can go a long, long way, even to great philanthropy can come under the heading of kindness as well. But the kindness is pointed and personal. Sad to say, the opposite end of kindness is cruelty. We didn't mention it, but rudeness is the opposite of courtesy. I think we all know that. You let the door slam in the other person's face and you grump at them when they say good morning. But cruelty is pointed and deliberate. And so the kindness-cruelty spectrum is a powerful one. And the last one belongs with sociability, but it's in an asymmetrical relationship. How is your character going to react when the character is in the presence of someone with a higher social status that means something, or in a higher level of authority? If your character is a child, how's the character going to react to parents and teachers? Is he going to be obedient or rebellious? What about your adult character? How would your adult character behave if he saw the flashing red and blue lights and got pulled over by a police officer? What would the reaction be? And so on. And this also applies to status where the status is legitimate. So what I mean by that is, you're meeting the president of a foundation that you belong to, or a famous author is coming to speak to your book club. So that where there is a clear status differential. And this is yet also fits in with sociability because the character has to navigate their position in society as well. So here comes the fun part. Once you understand those 4 groups, can you imagine a character who is very kind, but has a grumpy affability? Can you picture someone like this? We might think of a very stern school teacher who just has a very stiff, stern look about her. She's not going to brook anything going on in her classroom that is the slightest bit out of the norm, but let a kid trip and stumble and fall, she would rush to that kid with great warmth to help him up. So see how you can play with those, because you get a lot of, you get to understand these character traits more when you split them apart. And then that's when you realize that there actually truly are separate character traits and can be separately assigned. And some of your side characters can have a lot of interest added to them just by splitting a pair of traits. They become a personality instead of a cardboard cutout. So bear that in mind as you work. Okay, now we get to the fun part. What would you like to add to this, Victoria?
I don't know that I'm the fun part, but no, I never cease to be amazed at just how cool playing with character traits can be. Because as an author, you have all these people running around in your head and you think you know a lot about them. But when you start capturing them onto the page and then you start wrangling them into the context of the story, they often start to do their own things. And particularly with this group, I think you nailed it when you said once you start to toggle the things around, that's when you start deep diving into personality. That's what makes your characters interesting. Because without these incongruous, yet sometimes symmetrical, without all of these little pieces, your characters can just read as flat and not very interesting. But it's when we start revealing these little details about them, that's when you pique the interest of the reader. And ultimately, that's our whole goal, is to put something into the hands of our reader that they can thoroughly enjoy and keep turning pages deep into the night. So like in the case of your teacher, that's a perfect example, because this person is showing one particular face to the world as a character. But then when you throw in something else that happens that gives you, the writer, an opportunity to show a different aspect of that person that maybe the reader didn't expect, that's when the reading is really fun, because then you're allowed to make these discoveries. And then you start to wonder, well, if this character responded this way here, then what are they going to do over there? And that's when your stories become really fun. So I can't say enough about how diving into the character traits and considering how you can pack your people with them, sometimes at odds, sometimes not, only makes you that much more strong and gives you so much more material, and ultimately gives you so many more ways to attack your story, especially when things go sideways. These are tools that you can use to dig yourself out when your characters don't behave the way that you want them to. And that's what I love the most about it. So another successful, awesome episode. Please join us over in LiLLiPub Infusion Writing, where we continue the conversation, and we do sprints and workshops every Saturday. So come and join us, because we would love to hear your stories as well.
Yes, do come and join us, lillipub.org. We're waiting for you. We have great chit chats in the library and in the fusion writing community. You'll find a lot of interest groups, including a group that's interested in Zettelkasting, character development. We just have an awful lot of fun over in LiLLiPub, so please come join us. And until then, we will see you next week for the next topic. Bye-bye.
Thank you.